Akinator is a game where you have a mind-reading genie guess what you're thinking of by asking you a series of questions. It's actually very impressive. How does it work? We have no idea. And today I will remake it in Rust. Why am I remaking it in Rust? Okay, let me explain the bare minimum of how Akinator works. It has loads of data. It asks you questions to narrow down the data until it finds what you're looking for. Yeah, when I said bare minimum explanation, I really meant it. What I did first was download a bunch of datasets of celebrities to see how the data should be structured. Was that useful in any way? No. I somehow ended up downloading a 9.5 GB zip file. What was inside? I don't even know. Why did I do it? Because all the Akinator data is private. And everything even remotely connected to the word Akinator is just a package that interacts with their API. Turns out no one's crazy as I am to rebuild Akinator. Okay, because I couldn't find the datasets on the internet, I started working on the front end instead. If you don't know, front end is what you see and backend is what's happening behind the scenes. And now it's a great time to point out what I will be using. Tauri. Yes. I don't know how to make this more dramatic. Tauri is essentially a Rust package, library that allows you to build desktop applications just like a website. If you want a more detailed explanation on what Tauri is, this is not the place for it, man. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I just pulled the Wikipedia tab while writing the script. So, to keep it short, we're making Akinator as a desktop app using Rust. Back to the front end, I've quickly edited the Rust mascot into the mascot of Akinator. And when I say quickly, I really mean quickly. Look at the attention to detail, mate. Peak content. Anyway, I've created a project with Tauri. Now don't worry, there's no code involved here yet. No need to click off the video because you don't understand color the words. When I created the Tauri project, I had an example app already. So I pulled the programmer move and modified everything to suit my project instead of actually using my brain. Now we have buttons. Yes, no, I don't know, probably not. I don't even know what to do with those that are not yes or no, but hey. Next I added the image. Oh yeah, the whole project is called Rustinator. Don't worry, it's not Terminator, it's just Rust combined with Akinator. Alright? Alright. After that I tried to put the chat bubble that asks you questions near the mascot. It didn't work. Why did it not work? Because I forgot to remove the unused pixels and it pushed the chat bubble away from the image. A couple of minutes later I did the same thing. Why? Because I forgot to crop the top. Anyway, it eventually worked after some try and see. Someone should make that a CSS motto. How did I end up making two videos that involved CSS in a row? Either way, we've been talking for the past minute about this page. Here it is. Let's move on. Now that we got the front end partially done, I move to the back end. In order to achieve the way Akinator guesses, I would need machine learning. I eventually landed on Linfa, which is a project that aims to provide machine learning algorithms in Rust. But before we get into that, nah, don't worry, this is not a sponsored segment. Before we get into that, I had to figure out how the dataset will even look like. So I came up with this. We have a JSON file with all the questions you have to ask, mapped by IDs. Then we have the actual data, which consists of a bunch of persons. These persons have the name property, which is the answer, and the questions property, which is an array of the questions that are true to the person. Now, the plan was to use Linfa trees to create a decision tree algorithm based off the data we have. Keyword being was, because that held. Linfa trees requires multiple arrays of numbers and it finds the best one for a certain property. It's hard to explain and I am dumb, so instead what I used was this. A random question is asked, and if the user answers to the question with yes, it will remove all the elements that have the question set no. Which theoretically means it will narrow down to the correct result, assuming the user answers the questions correctly. Now that we figured out which algorithm we'll use, let's move on to the code. In case you don't know, this is not the first time I use Rust, and that changes absolutely nothing because I still don't know anything about it. But hey, the more you use something, the more you learn it. Or something like that. I started by modifying the main function to open and read JSON file data. Then I made it part of the JSON and create a clone of the data which we will use for the game session. After that I made the guess function which will act as a filter. It takes two arguments, question and answer. After that it iterates over the data and filters out items that don't match the question and the answer. And then it saves the current state of the game to the game dataset variable. Next up we have the choose question function, which chooses a question. A little front-end JS magic later and the game partially works now. Why partially? Because there's this huge bug that I didn't anticipate. For the sake of example, we will assume that the question is your character American? If the user replies with no, then the guess function will remove all the elements that don't include that question in the array. meaning it removes all the personalities that are not American. However, the choose question function takes a random question from the existing item, and the question "Is your character American?" isn't removed, and it can occur many times. How can we fix that? By storing the questions we have already asked in a variable and making sure that they don't get chosen again by adding an extra filter. Also, I used unsafe because I was in a rush to finish the backend. Apparently that makes the whole code crash if the code inside unsafe panics. Good to know. By that point the backend was almost finished, so I moved to the front end to finish the JavaScript part of it. Some funny functions later, it works. However, there's no gameplay loop, so I made the play again button. Now that everything is done, the most rational thing to do would be to increase the dataset so the game is more playable. Did I do that? Hell no, I'm not gonna sit on my chair and write questions about some random celebrities. Is this better than the original Akinator? No. Why would you even question that? I made this in 2 days. In all seriousness, if you want to add more data to the dataset or try out the game, there should be a GitHub link in the description. A big thanks to all of the patrons for supporting the channel, thanks for watching, and as always, see you in the next one.
Светит Дюралайт, это гигабайт. Игры ультралайт, овер гигабайт.